When we governed ourselves, we demonstrated those principles in everything that we did. Children were always at the core of our actions in our ancient laws. Potla, that is one that makes reference to us holding hands together in unity as people. Another principle and law is Gwa'sala, and that is a word that we use often when we're making reference to children, and it means, I will give my life for you. You are so important, you are so precious to me.
But I think the thing that was missing was our culture and people to build on that sense of belonging and connection for our children, because we didn't have it. Like the people that looked after the receiving home when I was there, there was no concept of who are you? Where do you come from? Who's your mom? Who's your dad? Who's your brothers and your sisters? And maybe you should go visit them. When's the last time you saw them? I didn't see my older siblings for years and years.
All our people want to do is have family. They want to raise their own children. They don't want them to be raised by other people. Our people here want to have a say over their own children. So when we look at recent actions, the folks that have gotten together and worked extremely hard to negotiate with the government and find a way to take over the control of our families and our children, to illustrate that we know what we're doing, we know how this should take place, we know what our ancient laws are about family, we know those things and we want to practice them. It's important to share the stories of what happened. Put the stories out there, because there's a lot of sadness, injury, I guess you call it. So I think it's really important for people to tell their stories, to give that witness to what happened, to validate themselves that what happened to them wasn't their fault. It happened to them, and it's happened to lots of other people. You have that common story, that shared pain with many others that went through it as well. And that is the beginning of leading towards understanding and trust.
I had 5 other siblings, and I am going to be 44 this year. So I was born in 1980, and during the 80s was a really rough time for our community. There was a lot of alcoholism, with the forced relocation and residential school, and it was so common everywhere. My aunties, my uncles, they would drink for so long, and with us and our cousins and our friends, it was like we had a little, like a telephone wire kind of thing on the reserve, you know what I mean? It's like as soon as we saw the ministry car come on the reserve, I was like, alert everyone, and for us as young kids, all our friends and our cousins would come, like, the ministry's coming, and then we would all get out of the house, run to an auntie or uncle's house. And it was literally, the fear was so real. We're running to this house, that house, we're literally boarding up the windows, we're young, like we're grabbing a couch and we're putting it against the door to keep them out. I remember a time where there was probably over 10 of us, and we're climbing in the attic. That's the fear that we had as children. Eventually the time would come where the ministry would catch up and we'd be removed from the home, and it's horrible. I'm the second oldest. To see my younger siblings, the crying and everything, being removed from our home and not knowing where we're going to be put, not knowing where we're going to go. The second time we got taken, they couldn't find anyone on the reserve. We got separated. Me and my 2 sisters got put in a home out by the airport. You know, so this is more than just a walk away from my parents. You know, it was really hard. You know, they scrubbed us down, hot water, combing our hair, cutting our hair. It was really hard. We didn't know what was going on, why we were being treated that way. And then she bought us all these dresses and stuff like that we don't normally wear, and it was so that we could go to church. You know, and that was something that wasn't really a part of our lives as well. You know, and it was really overwhelming for us. We were just so young and walked into this church. And we were the only natives in the church. You know, and it just felt like we were just put on display. You know, like, look at our little charity case. They were vegetarian. You know, these kinds of things need to be looked into before children are placed into homes. You know, their beliefs and their diet. You know, we sat there at the table for so long. And they had this vegan meat. I can't remember what it was called. And we didn't like it. No, you sit there until you finish all your food. I didn't know until we were older. And my sister was being really bullied by one of the children in the home. You know, it was being done when me and my other sister, her two older sisters, weren't around. You know, and if we had known, we definitely would have said or did something. You know, so it was a really horrible experience for all of us. We were there, I think it was probably about a month, and it was the longest month of our lives, little children. And then our band, purchased what was called a group home. And it was also out by the airport there. We were the first ones in that group home. So my parents went there and they helped set the whole group home up, bunk beds, we had a trampoline, we had it was so different, and we were finally able to be back with my brothers. You know, we were all together in the group home. And we were only there for maybe 3 weeks. My parents had sobered up. It was a happier part of our removal because it was people from within our community, you know, and my parents could come and go, they could visit us, they could take us, and we were only there for 3 weeks, and then we were back home. And I still remember my parents hugging us when we got home. They just hugged all of us. You're never gonna go back into ministry care ever again. And we didn't. You know, my parents made sure we didn't go back into ministry care. And it's a sad and real reality. You know, it's like a pact of silence. It's something that's not really spoken about. You know, it's almost like shame, you know, like that you were in ministry care. So it's not something you really want to talk about. But it shouldn't be that way. You know, you should be able to talk about these things. You should be able to rip the Band-Aid off and allow healing. The stigma is still there, you know, like the mistrust and the fear, you know, and like having gone through what I went through as a child, I've gone up against the ministry with my own children more than once, you know, and it was not very pretty. And I've also stepped in as a support for many of my family members to try and ensure and take the extra step and go the extra mile to make sure that nobody, like none of my nieces or nephews or anybody else has to go through what we went through as children.
I come from a family of 12 children. There are 4 sisters and 1 brother remaining. 3 of my sisters and myself. Why I asked to be, well, I suggested that people get interviewed was because the intergenerational thing. Like I said, my mother was very mean, cruel to my 2 older sisters. I was the same way. And then there's so much violence, and I was involved with my 2 of my children's father, who was a foster child. He grew up all his life in a foster home, and he was mean, very dominating, everything like that. I left him, and after he tried to kill me, the last time he tried, I was in Alberta, had no resources, no recourse, nobody to help, nothing. And I was like 19, I think, 18, 19. So I left my children there. I didn't know what to do. I figured they would, and they did end up in foster care. But it was a horrible time for the 2 girls. Their brother, younger brother, ended up with my sister. And that's where the breakdown in the system is, because I didn't know I could get him back. And then I just found out that he, she was a social worker. My sister, she's passed. But I just found out recently that it was a really horrible time for him. For my son, we have these little cards, like just deck of cards. You pull one out and it says, what was your childhood family? He pulled that card. He said, I don't want to talk about it. But he had mentioned before it was a horrible time. I'd gotten into fights. At the time we were drinking it, we've stopped since '99. So, but prior to that time, he was. We couldn't visit him. My sister, we were supposed to have him for a weekend, carnival weekends, and they left on the island. Not even 2-3 hours later, they came back for him, took him away with them. So, of course, it caused a lot of anger, frustration, hurt. And I didn't know my power. I didn't know I had any power. I'd had no interaction with my son's social workers or anything. The only interaction I had was with my sister, and I think it was her. I asked if we could have visits with my son. We had that one visit, just one, and then she wrenched him out of her. We'd gone to the carnival, and we came home for lunch. We lived just close to the carnival was up, and we were having lunch. Then we were going to go back. And then she took him. So, even if, like I said, we had absolutely no contact with MCFD. So there was no clue on what
was going on.
And the fact that I always just gave in and did what had to be done. I didn't know I could fight. I had no idea. And I didn't, in our community, I didn't know. Even so, even if we did try to fight, there was nothing that could seem to be done. The MCFD had full and sole control, complete control over what anything to do. I remember different people asking for so-and-so to come to a potluck church cultural event, and or even absolutely not, and it wouldn't happen. So, it's just, I think we really need to be open ears, open to listening and learning and seeking out everyone has something wise to share, being open to that and amenable to implementing any changes rather than doing it their way, just their way. Possibly having an actual committee with names of said committee to for people to not necessarily tattletale, but to give ideas to, to look at ways to grow, ways to promote growth, ways to regain our voice, just to be able to speak out. Just having everyone being able to listen and be supportive rather than being dominant. I'm in control here. You do what I say. Knowing me, Bob, is there anything that you can think of that there's, spot?
My name's Christy George. I grew up here. I was raised in Port Hardy. I was raised on the reserve by my mom. My grandparents are William and Alice George. I moved to Nanaimo at the end of 2001, and I lived there for 4 years because one of my kids were born cleft. We moved there so that he could be closer to the doctors that he needed and to be closer for surgeries. But I think we adjusted really well. In 2010, somebody phoned and reported saying that I was making my kids sleep in animal feces and I was neglecting my kids. So I had to prove that I wasn't doing anything wrong. The first time I was frustrated because it didn't seem like anything I said or did proved that I was going to be a good enough parent to my kids. And I was a single parent at that time. They were a little bit rude. They didn't care for their tone or their attitude. Because to me, it felt like they felt like they were better. It felt like they were watching everything I did, and if I did something wrong, they were just going to come and take them. I think it was like 4 months before I finally fought them enough to close that case. I had a good support team. I had a few people at the health center that were there to help me, and my mom was there the whole time. In 2019, we took on custody of my little sister when my dad passed away, and I had to go to court against ministry to get her out of their care because both her parents passed. And then in 2020, we took on 3 other kids, plus my own 4. So we had quite the house full. And then one of the kids made a false report to the ministry. And so all the kids were removed except my own. And they told me that if I didn't sign a safety plan, that they were going to take my younger 2, who are now 14 and 16. And so we had to sign a safety plan saying that my husband wasn't allowed at my house and 2 of my sons weren't allowed at my house. Otherwise, they were going to come in and take my younger 2 kids. And so I did what I needed to for that. I signed her stupid paper, and then She wouldn't return any of my calls, and after my husband went to court, they said that there were no charges and that everything was dropped, so we assumed that he was going to be able to come back home. But she showed up at my house like the next day after he came back home and said that he wasn't allowed to be because their safety plan overrode the cops' court documents. And when we tried to get a hold of her, she wouldn't return our calls, but she showed up at our doorstep quite a few times last year. She even had my grandkids sent to wherever they were removed. It was either my grandkids leave or my son had to leave my house. So for like 3 months, my grandkids weren't home. They had to live in Camp River. At the end of all of that, I called a meeting with a social worker and her supervisor because she wasn't giving me answers for questions that I had. So we met at the health center, and some of the stuff that she was making me do, she shouldn't have even done. And he told her that right in front of us, like that safety plan. She told him, or she told me it was voluntary. I said, no, I have a room full of people here who were here when it happened. But she kept insisting that she told me it was voluntary. And that's not what she said when she told me to sign that paper. She told me that I had to sign it or she was going to take my kids. It was hard. We ended up losing my husband to suicide after all of that. It's been a hard go. I think all of the accusations and the inaccuracy between the community and the ministry is not fair. And I'm sure we're not the only family that's gone through this with them. It's literally torn our family apart. And even after all of this, it's been a year now since my grandkids have been home, and we still haven't gotten a letter from the ministry saying that their file or their investigation's been closed. My second youngest is having a really rough go. He doesn't like when people come unannounced to the house because he doesn't know if they're going to get taken, and that's his biggest fear. He's getting removed from the house. And sadly, he started smoking. I've gotten him out of it since, but fall into an addiction so young. They've gotten really bad anxiety. The younger two especially, because they're the only two minors I have left. The other kids are all adults. I think it'll be easier to have jurisdiction over our own kids instead of having somebody from like the outside come in, because now it's in the hands of our community.
My legal name is Elizabeth. I go by Andy. I'm not exactly sure how long I spent in the foster care system. I was put in care when I was really little, about 2 to 3 years old, and then taken back out of care, and then I was put back in when I was 8 years old. The process talking to social workers was hell most of the time. A lot of the times we'd be put on hold for hours at a time. Us kids would have to sit in the MCFD office or in building blocks, I believe is what it's called down there, just waiting to hear whatever, just to either not hear it or get the bad news. There was one social worker specifically who seemed like she kind of had a hate on for my mom. She would repeatedly target her and come up with surprise visits when nobody phoned her. I have a lot of specific memories with 2 foster homes, both of which were very familial in a way. One of them was a Dutch family who were very sweet, very grandparent-like, and then the other one was actually my Auntie Patty. I lived with her for about a year, and I have nothing but good things to say about her, which you don't get that a lot with these foster homes. It was very hard to form relationships. Some of the families you could tell had many children, so this is just a routine. They're doing the same thing again, so they don't want to get too attached. There, in a lot of homes, there was clear favoritism, which I kind of understand. Some of us acted out, so I get that. Others just didn't seem like they wanted anything to do with us. They'd sit on the couch all day, they'd sit there drinking their wine, and I remember getting yelled at a lot just for being me. I'd get blamed for a bunch of stuff that never happened. So it was pretty challenging having to go through that myself with having no coping skills. The counselors that I was provided kept leaving me, I think I went through 10 counselors by the time I was 12. It was hard. They didn't really care to keep any of us on a steady line. It was pretty dark, and it certainly felt a lot more grim than it actually was. There were times where I wasn't allowed to see my mom for weeks at a time, not knowing how long I was going to be in this place, not knowing exactly what's going on with me or my family. It was scary. There were a lot of sleepless nights. And some of the families being fairly cold towards us didn't really help too much. I was apprehended at 8 years old, and I was 9 when I heard that my siblings were apprehended, and they were put in the home that I was in previous, which scared me. It was very cold. I was very lonely. I think at that point was when my mental health issues started to get really bad. I was lashing out at everything, and I wouldn't get along with any of the kids in my homes. And I remember I was feeling scared for my little sister because she doesn't remember any of it. She was that small, and seeing the way they treated me as an older child, I didn't know how they'd treat my 7-year-old brother and my 3-year-old sister. So that was about a year and a half of hell. And then when the youngest was born, I'm 10 years older than he is. He was put in a separate home. My mother was allowed him for 10 hours a day, I believe, because she was still feeding. And then I believe he was about 3 to 6 months old when they started taking him for the full days. And later on, shortly before we were given back to my mom, he was put in Auntie Patty's home with us. That was the only time we were all actually together in care, and that was because specifically Auntie Patty fought tooth and nail to keep us together. Otherwise, they would have held us separate, and we probably wouldn't have gone back to my mother if she hadn't stepped in. I think all of it was a huge challenge, constantly being moved back and forth. There were times where I'd stay in homes for 2 weeks, other times for 3 months, 1 month. It was always back and forth. So the constant stress of, am I going to have to move today? And if so, where? Was always a big challenge. Another challenge was the embarrassment of packing my bags and my clothes in garbage bags. Didn't feel like I was being treated very human, having nothing to carry my stuff in. Getting along with the new kids was always a challenge because it felt like I was showing up to season 5 of a show as a new character, kind of having to fit myself in there. I never did learn how to cope, and sadly I don't think any child in the system really knows how to cope unless they have that one parent who actually cares, much like Auntie Patty or the Fabers, who actually care to teach you how to cope with these things and teach you how to express your emotions in a healthy way. I know most foster children, actually, I can point out a couple who have lost their siblings to overdosing and going through alcohol poisoning because they were never taught how to cope, which sucks because I was in the same home as a lot of the ones who passed away in this last year from all the overdoses. So that's right now it's a bit of a challenge even. Just seeing lines of them under the ground after so many years, it's not fun. Children are people too. We feel things, and in some cases, we felt things a lot stronger than half of those adults have ever felt. I'm willing to bet We love our families. We don't want to be separated from our siblings like that ever again. Set up some more support systems because all these foster children are dying from alcoholism. That's all I can say. You see it everywhere. Like, every day I'm opening new Facebook to new somebody else died, somebody else overdosed. You know, it's not fun, and most of them are foster children. So it's not fair. And maybe let us visit our parents once in a while. That was one of the harder parts, just once in a while, because 3 months to a year is not okay. That's not fine, especially when all your other siblings live at home. Thank you guys for reaching out and asking. I've actually been waiting to be asked about some of these things.
I feel like, I've gone to counseling for, oh my gosh, so many years now, trying to process what I've been through and what it kind of made me. And there's still parts of me I don't quite understand, and I know it'll come eventually, but being in care of the ministry when I was started right off, like when I was born. In foster care, when you're in a foster home or a group home, they don't read to you, they don't hold you. If anything, they abuse you. They take advantage of, how vulnerable you are. But when I became a mom, I swore my boys would never go through what I went through, ever. All I know is I was in and out of care a lot. And those homes weren't good. My last home was probably the best one that I've been in, and but I don't know if people are aware that what they do to kids when they're little creates a life of just kind of like an uphill battle of PTSD and medical issues. Yeah. I don't know. I remember, I don't even know where it was or who I was staying with, but the foster dad hit me hard enough that all I remember is like my jaw was really swollen, fat, and I couldn't open and shut my mouth for a while. I couldn't eat, and he didn't bring me to the hospital. I think, when you go into care, people just objectify you, and for me it was always just using me for sex when I was a little girl. And I remember I think I was like 5 or 6, and I was in a group home, and I remember waking up that day going, something's gonna happen, something bad is gonna happen. And the foster mom was like, oh, I'm going to take everybody else for a walk, but Sala, you need to stay home. And I was like, no, I want to go with you. No, you got to stay here. And my foster dad grabbed my hand, and I was like, oh. I knew right away what was going to happen. And so it was funny because I feel like, even though I had that feeling, I still couldn't take it into the situation into my own hands and like run. It was like, okay, here we go again. And so afterwards I remember throwing up, and I went up onto my bunk, and he came in and he put his hands on his hips, and he's like, you're not allowed to tell anybody. This is our secret. And he was really mad, and I just shook or nodded my head yes, and I just wanted him to go away. So he went away, but then he would come into the bathroom when the foster mom was bathing us and just watch. And then he would take us out of bed in the middle of the night and take pictures of us naked. And so I remember this other lady in a group home too, and we found these shirts that were exactly alike, and I remember us being so happy because we were just rummaging around in a pile of clothes trying to find something that fit. And we found these shirts and we're like, oh, we're sisters now. But when I was finally an adult and I came forward with these allegations, the RCMP investigated the other people that lived in the home, and we found out that it happened to other people too. And it wasn't just me. And that man died before we could take him to court. And I remember being so pissed off because I was like, I wanted to face him and I wanted to tell him what he had done. And how screwed up it made my life. So I remembered, it's good just to melt into the room. It's good to just melt into the crowd. So that's what I did for the majority of my life. I didn't think it was okay to talk or be seen or noticed. And I still have issue with that, especially around like white men. And it's so funny because my husband's white. But, people that are in positions of authority, I still have a really hard time trying to talk to. But it was during those times that you're living in homes where you don't belong and you're not recognized as a daughter or a son or a sibling. You're just there. And I remember my brothers and we made up this game of, if we get hit with I don't know what it's called, a horsewhip, those really thick pieces of leather, that we weren't going to cry. We weren't going to cry. And so we peed in bed. All of us, we peed in bed because we'd been through so much trauma, and so we'd get strapped. And I remember we all just stood in a row and we got our hands slapped really hard with this leather whip, and we didn't cry, and you could see the foster dad kind of getting mad, like. So it was finally done, and we ran upstairs and we all started laughing. Like laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. And then I started to cry because I was like, so then my brother, if he didn't pee in bed, he would take my sheets and put it on his bed and take the blame. And I lied about it. And so my foster mom took me in the bathroom, and it was ivory soap. I can still taste it. She made me eat the soap. And I remember my mouth was quivering like really hard because it tasted awful and disgusting. And she made me chew it. And then she made me swallow it. She made me eat that whole bar because I lied. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry. And I haven't cried for years and years, up until like 4 years ago when I started to actually cry. So I don't know, I think on some days I process what's been going on, and I feel, I don't know, maybe some grief or loss, but for most often I just focus on today, and I focus on what I need to do today. I don't focus on what I need to do a month or a year from now. It's almost like you just walk through life and you're not really, you're like the person melting into the environment all the time because nobody really notices who you are or what you've done or your past or what you've gone through, because I don't let them see any of it. You know, I don't tell anybody, and I don't know. We all are the way we are because of something, and I just wish sometimes that life hadn't been so rough on me. And so, you know, with respect to the future, to the kids, like, I really want Namima Village to be a light. I want it to be known as somewhere they can go and they'll be accepted and loved and cared for and nurtured. And I just want to give them everything that they need to thrive and flourish.